Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and good afternoon for those on the East Coast. I am very excited to have Gil Canare from Sirius Decisions presenting on this webinar today. We're going to be recording the session, so we'll make that available to you after the presentation, and we will also offer an opportunity for Q&A at the end of the event. So Gil, over to you.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks everyone for attending today. Today we're going to be talking about digital, and we're going to talk about it from a number of standpoints. We're going to start first of all by talking about how the nature of digital has changed and how it's critical to the B2B marketing process, and then we'll move on towards how do you define the right form of digital for you. So let's start by answering some of the questions that you probably heard. You know, as a B2B marketer, I'm pretty sure that everyone has been talking about the fact that the digital is becoming more important. You just can't do business without it anymore. But one of the things that you probably haven't seen is some quantifiable data around that fact. And so earlier this year at Sirius Decisions, we actually ran a buying study where we talked to around 1,000 B2B executives, verified B2B executives, that we knew had purchased something, a B2B product, over the course of the last 6 months. And we asked them in that survey about the nature, the number, and the type of interactions they had with the company they bought the product from. And we define interaction in this context as an exchange of information. You know, what you can see on this chart is the result of that survey. At the bottom, you see the price in thousands. So it starts all the way down at a few thousands of dollars, and it goes all the way up to the millions. And on the vertical, you see the number of interactions. You know, the two lines represent human, meaning this is an interaction where a person talked to another person and the information was exchanged that way. You know, that could have been done in person, that could have been through the phone, that could have been done through live chat or even email, but it was a human interaction. The other line, the orange line, is the self-guided interactions. And what we mean by self-guided is this is when the buyer, this person, went out and found the information on their own without help from the vendor company, without help from a person. As you can see, there's a couple of things that should be taken away from this slide. You know, one is, you know, in almost the entire length of this thing, human and digital interactions were both involved. You know, it's rare that you'll find a buying interaction that will be composed of just one. So it's really important when you think about digital, about how to integrate it with your ongoing human efforts, because it doesn't exist in isolation. So that's one thing that you should take away. The other is, you know, we still get clients sometimes that come to us and say, look, my product is really complicated, it's really expensive, it's probably something that is going to require a face-to-face sale. And they sort of devalue digital a little bit. It's absolutely true that as you get more expensive, the human interactions become more important. But if you look at the percentage of interactions that are represented by this self-guided, which are largely digital interactions, they're never less than around 40%. So what that says is it doesn't matter what you're selling, you're going to need to have the digital elements in there. The key is how they interact, how they integrate with the human interactions, and the type. So that's the big takeaway and the great finding that we found from this question in the survey. We also asked another question in the survey. And in this question, what we did is we asked the survey respondents to tell us if during one of these stages in the buying cycle, during each of these stages in the buying cycle, did you talk to a salesperson? Did you get information from a human being? So we looked at it across the 3 different phases of the Sirius Decisions buying cycle. We looked at education, where they're trying to determine if this problem or opportunity is something that they even want to address, and they're trying to learn more about it, and they're trying to figure out if they're going to commit to changing it. We looked at the solution stage as well. In the solution stage, once the buyer has committed to doing something about that problem or that opportunity, they're now trying to figure out the exact approach. Most problems have multiple ways to fix it. So they're trying to figure out the exact approach that they want to use amongst the many choices they probably have. And then the selection stage is a stage where they actually select the vendor. They make a decision about exactly who they're going to use for this. So these are the 3 stages, and over the top on the horizontal, we have the different types of purchases. We start by looking at what we call independent purchases. Independent purchases are those that are really transactional. It's one, maybe 2 people sitting down, doing a little bit of research and making a decision and buying almost immediately. Transactional, quick turn, you know, relatively simple purchases. The second set is what we call consensus. In a consensus purchasing mode, you're looking at a departmental purchase or a functional purchase where a group of people have to come to a decision, have to come to an agreement before they can make the purchase. So this represents more strategic, more complex, and usually more expensive purchases. And the last thing that you look at here is our committee purchase model. And a committee purchase model represents the most strategic purchasing decisions a company can make. These are the ones that require practically the entire organization to agree and require input and agreement at the highest levels of the organization, and they represent probably the most expensive purchase a company can make. So that's the chart. The stuff that you see in orange represents the places where that company talked to a person in that stage. And the blue represents the places where they didn't, and they did everything in a self-guided way. So what do you take from this chart? Well, when you look at it, one thing is really clear is that despite what you might have heard, the B2B salesperson isn't going away. The entire world is not going to be digital. So you see that in many places, the human interactions are important or even primary. But the other side of that is take a look at all the blue. What this shows is that in every single stage across every single model, the human interactions are important, or the digital interactions are critical and important to getting that purchase closed. Even in the committee purchases, those gigantically complex and strategic purchases, we found that over half of the people said they got through the entire education stage without talking to a person. And this was actually surprising to me, but all the way down in selection, some percentage of people, about 35%, said we made the decision and didn't talk to a person during this stage. So what should this mean to you? This means that digital has to be there, especially in the early stages, because what's happening if you're not there is you're not being able to engage them in the education portion of this, and they're going to make a decision and you may not even be considered. So the scariest part about this is the deals that you didn't even know you were in and got bounced out of before you even knew they happened. The other thing that you should take away from this is the role of digital marketing in the buying process isn't to the early stages. It isn't restricted to education. Your digital strategy has to be able to participate and motivate and get people to further down the buying cycle all the way down to selection. You have to actively participate in every stage. So I love this slide because this is a slide that we can put in front of executives and say, look, this is what's going on. These are the things that we have to think about and address. This next slide is another favorite of mine because one of the things that we get asked a lot is, what's digital, or what should I do with my digital team and where should I put them? If you think about it, most people still think of digital as being the webcasts and emails and SEO. And yes, absolutely, those are a lot of the digital tactics. But the challenge is these days, when you think about the other marketing that you do, when was the last time you did a print piece that didn't have a URL in it? When was the last time you did a trade show or a live event that did not have some form of digital component? So the question isn't really what's digital anymore, but rather how digital is something, because everything is a little bit digital. And that changes the scope and the nature of the discussion you have around digital marketing. It's not just about those core tactics. It's about how those tactics integrate and support all the other marketing that you do. It also has a really interesting impact in terms of organization design. We get people that come back and say, hey, should I put every single person that touches digital in one org and call it the digital team? The reality is if you stuck every single person that worked on digital in a marketing organization, that group would probably just be called marketing because practically everybody's in it. So as we sit down and as we walk through the transformation framework that we have today, we want you to think about digital in this nature and the fact that it's something that stretches across not just the digital tactics, but impacts everything in marketing. So with that, let's talk about the transformation challenge itself. When we look at companies these days, there are no companies out there that don't have digital capabilities. No, not any companies of any meaningful size. Everybody's got a website. Most people have email and social, etc. The challenge is what happened is all of those things were created in an organic ad hoc way. 20 years ago, you needed a website, so you got a web team, and then you needed ads, and then you needed email, and then you needed social. So these companies all have these teams that are running around doing good work, doing valuable work, but there's no strategic plan. There's no overriding vision about how these things connect together and how they serve a common purpose. And then the challenge that this adds as well is that when companies come in and try to do that, now you're running into a set of entrenched interests, a set of people that have been doing this for a while. They're comfortable with how they've been doing it, and it's been successful sometimes, and it's hard to get people to change and realign in that scenario. And that's the challenge that we set out to solve. How do we help companies bring order to this landscape, get everybody aligned at a really fundamental level, and then get to the point where they can not just be aligned, but also understand what that means to their buyers and then execute appropriately. And that's the digital transformation framework. And this framework has three major pieces. We're going to talk about the concept of digital type. This concept is important because the word digital is a very broad word. It means different things to different people, and it should, because different types of companies need different approaches to be successful. Once we identify the type and you have a sense of how to do that, we're going to talk about the concept of a digital journey and how to map it and how it is fundamentally driven and impacted by the digital type that you find yourself in. And then finally, we'll touch a little bit on the digital capabilities model, and we'll talk about how do you actually support a company of that type and that specific journey. So this is what we'll cover over the next 30 minutes or so, and we've got some great examples to sort of bring a lot of these to life as well. The digital transformation framework, digital type model. It's a mouthful, but in the end, what it really says is, what is it that you need to do? How should you approach digital to be most effective in your specific business situation, in your specific market, with your specific product set? And the way that we establish what the answer is we look at three really core questions that everyone should be able to answer. We'll start by looking at the offerings that you provide, the product and services that you're trying to sell. Are they customized in the sense that every single customer you sell to buys something a little bit different? Or do all your customers buy pretty much exactly the same standardized thing? You can also look at the offering axis against your competitors. Are you selling something that they can only buy from you? Your product is highly differentiated, no one else has it? Or are you and your competitors all selling pretty much the same commodity? They can buy interchangeable products from any number of people. So think about your products and where they sit in this space. The next thing that we look at is the whole concept of purchase complexity. And what we mean by this is, how hard is it to buy this product? And we look at this through three different dimensions. The first one is, how expensive is it? Is it a few hundreds of dollars, or is it thousands or millions? Clearly the higher and more expensive a product is, the more complex the purchase process is likely going to be. And then we look at it from the point of view of how many people are involved in the process. Is this something somebody at the company goes online, orders, and is done with? Or is this something that's going to require an RFP and meetings and executive presentations? Those are the complex ones that are out on the 5 end of the scale. And then the last thing that we'll look at is time. Is this a decision you make in hours or a decision you make in years? All three of those things sort of roll together to place you somewhere in that purchase complexity cycle. And then lastly, we look at how you're actually selling and going to market with these products. Are you selling them in a self-service way where you have a website and most people are expected to navigate it on their own? Or do you have an army of people in very nice suits running around talking to customers and walking them hand in hand through the process? Our belief is if you can answer these three questions, we can place you into a digital type that will greatly inform and guide your digital marketing efforts. Now, one thing that I will say as you're looking at this, if you're in a large company with multiple product sets, there may not be one answer to this. And you may have to find yourself sort of looking at this at a product by product scenario to see what the different answers are for each product. But in the end, after you go through that exercise, what you'll find is there's only so many combinations of answers that are possible. And even if you have hundreds of products, you'll end up in just a few types. And that's one of the benefits of this approach. It lets you consolidate, it lets you scale, it lets you do things repeatedly instead of treating every problem as a unique problem. So let's take a look at some of the different examples that we see. So one of the first ones that we see is what we call digital first. And in digital first, you're selling something that's really standardized. It's relatively inexpensive, and most people buy in a self-service way. If you do this exercise and you find yourself in this space, then you should be primarily relying on digital to market and sell your product, because frankly, that's the only way you're going to make money in many situations like this, because digital gives you the reach, the scale, and the cost effectiveness to deliver this effectively. So if you're sitting there and your organization ends up on this side or this model, then what that means is the organization that you have has to be good at driving inquiry, driving traffic, at converting that traffic on the website, at executing and managing an e-commerce site of some form or another, because that's probably how you're being purchased. So you can see the set of skills, the set of capabilities that a digital-first organization should have. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Aimee, and Aimee can give you some real examples of one of these digital-first organizations.
Thank you so much. First, I'm going to start with just like a note. We've seen in the industry that CEOs are now ranking digital marketing as the most important tech investment that they can make in the next 5 years. That's a piece of research from Gartner, just another perspective. Okay, next slide. And here we have a customer example. So thank you. So Bazaar Voice is one of our leading customers. If you're not familiar with Bazaar Voice, it's an online network that connects more than 1/2 billion, and I'm saying billion, consumers to thousands of retailers and brands, tens of millions of products and services, where customer feedback and online reviews are super critical for this particular community. And the first challenge that Bazaar Voice had when they came to us to Clickability was they needed to redo their website. And so they needed to basically overhaul and replatform their global redesign, because if you think about it, all of these consumers were coming to their website as their point of interaction. And they needed to do it quickly without reliance on IT. So a new head of digital marketing came in, had a 3-month evaluation process across 16 vendors, and selected Clickability because of the web content management features and the responsive design for mobile, and really had created a great partnership with the Clickability services team. So next slide. So this is a note from Greg Frame, who actually just recently left to go to Lithium, but he was at Bazaar Voice for quite a number of years. And you know, he was under like major pressure to get a new website redesigned and launched to increase their traffic. And he felt that the SaaS solution was the easiest way to go to market. And that's why he partnered up with us. So thanks a lot, Gil. Hey, Gil, I think you might be on mute.
I said some brilliant things on mute as well. I was actually saying this is a great example, because this is an example of a company where their primary interaction was digital. There's no people involved in this exercise. In that situation, your website is critical, because that's your primary way of delivering. So a great example of how a digital-first organization operates in that mode. You know, let's look at the other side of it now. Let's look at digital support. In a digital support organization, it's exactly the opposite. You're selling something that's very customized and differentiated. It's very expensive, likely, and you've got a sales team that's out there selling it for you. So if you're looking at an organization and your products fit in this space, digital is still equally as important as it is in digital first, but it's a different kind of digital. You know, what you're talking about here is being able to find the few people that can actually buy your product. Typically, products like this don't have a broad audience. There's a few people that can buy it. Digital marketing's goal is to find that person, qualify them, you know, get them involved in the waterfall, nurture them through the waterfall, get them the sales, and then accelerate them through the sales pipeline. It's a set of capabilities that's built around being able to engage, being able to sustain a conversation, being able to answer questions, and develop a long-term relationship. Again, critical, but very, very different from what you would see in a digital-first scenario. So Aimee, tell us a little bit about the PR Newswire and their efforts.
Sure. So, you know, PR Newswire is like a leading, you know, press release outlet. Based in New York City, the offices all over the U.S. and Canada. And, you know, they were just really dependent on IT to keep their website going. And it was a real challenge for them. because they couldn't scale and they were having trouble when traffic spiked. So if a particularly, newsworthy piece of news came out through their network, traffic would go up and their website couldn't support it. So they also were under a tight deadline and needed a new partner to deliver their website. And so they they worked with Clickability. They liked the SaaS delivery model, the scalable infrastructure, and the features. And they've been using us for a number of years and, really just connecting, millions of people around the world with minute-by-minute updates. But if you think about theirs, their website features has two elements. So one is digital first to the consumers. The other is digital support. So any of organizations who want to partner with them to deliver their press releases, they're coming to get information. They're going to talk to a sales rep. They're going to build an account relationship and eventually transact with them. So they really have two levels, and this is the digital support example.
Great, and I think that example of that continuous engagement with a long-term partner is a really good case, and we see it a lot in digital support scenarios, because that's not a situation where they interact with you and they go away. You have to build that relationship. You have to support that relationship with all the complexity that it brings to the table. So that's a great example of digital support. Let's look at the stuff in the middle, because digital support and digital first represent sort of the far ends of that map. There are things in the middle. So for example, we have this model that we call high purchase complexity. And this is when you see somebody selling something that's objectively expensive or complicated. Maybe it's really expensive or it's a technologically dense product. But it's actually, when you look at it, sort of standardized and not that differentiated. So it's actually possible to sell these things online. A really good example of this is we have a client, GE Power, and they sell six-figure generators on a website. When you step back and think about it, it's like, who buys a six-figure generator on a website? Plenty of people. Because what happens is, for their audience, that product, even though it's expensive, is something that they're really used to. They buy a lot of them probably. And that's something that they're comfortable saying, yep, that's exactly what I want, because they understand the specs and what it delivers, and they're comfortable pushing a buy button. So that's an example of taking something that would normally take a phone call and a lot of conversation and making it really simple to purchase. And that's a benefit of a digital marketing model. That said, they will allow you in that same site to go talk to a salesperson. They'll support any of the different models. But it's really interesting to see how they've turned something that you would never think would be purchasable online into something that you can buy like anything from Amazon. Really good example of that. The next model is what I call custom offering. And a lot of you are probably sitting at your desk, and I suspect on your desk there's probably something you got from a trade show or a vendor. Whatever that is a great example of this custom offering model, because the thing that you're staring at right now, that you're holding it, is something that's probably reasonably cheap, but it's highly differentiated because it's branded specifically for that customer. The challenge in that model is that thing is cheap and you cannot afford to hire really expensive salespeople to sell it. So you end up in a model that's self-service, low ASP, but you have to be able to support that customization, that differentiation. So we see this a lot as well. And if you watch any kind of TV lately, you've probably seen commercials for a company called Vistaprint. That's pretty much their model as well. And then lastly, let's talk about design-driven. When you look at design-driven, this is an interesting one because you're selling something that's, again, very standard, but the purchase process is highly complicated. Or you're selling it into a complex business environment, which means you need salespeople. So a great example of this is that laptop you guys are probably sitting in front of. There's components in there that cost a few dollars, so they're really basic, they're common components. But in order to sell that component into that laptop, the manufacturer had to deal with the design engineer that actually designed that laptop, the manufacturing engineer that has to figure out how to make it, and the procurement people that are purchasing that stuff in bulk. And the only way they're going to do that is with sales support. So you end up with a relatively standardized product, but a deeply complex process, and you need sales. The other place where we see this is if you're selling software or other elements that plug into a more complex technology cycle or a technology landscape, then you get that as well, because your product might be simple, but people have to understand the impact of it on the larger ecosystem, and that's when you need to roll in the sales engineers and the salespeople to explain that and make sure people are comfortable. So these are the 3 different digital hybrids, and we believe that most companies will fit in these spaces. So Aimee, tell us a little bit about a hybrid customer that you have.
Sure. So I actually chose one of our publishing customers as an example, because if you think about Gray TV, they are operating 40 television stations. They're continuing to acquire more stations, serving 30 different markets. And so for them, they have super high traffic, super large content libraries, thousands of users who are contributing to that content on the marketing side. So, high volume of content, high traffic. And what they're challenged with is being able to roll that out across all those networks and local markets. So they really needed a custom approach. And so they came to us. Their business goals were to increase online advertising revenue, maintain that lean team of digital marketers, not counting those other content users, and bring in new revenue streams through innovating the website. And so they chose us primarily because of reusable templates, being able to actually apply these templates across all these local sites and all these local television stations' websites. So that was a great example, and they actually were able to scale and drive 70 times traffic growth since they launched on Clickability's CMS. And this also is a long-term partner of ours.
That's a great example of custom offering, because if you think about it, they have to tailor so many different channels to so many different types of users, but they're not getting paid for it directly. So they've got to do it in a really streamlined way. So great example of that.
Exactly. And if you see this, like just the screenshot, the weather, that has to be custom to each market, right? And then you've got the local news, but the templates itself are standard across the network. So there you have it.
So a little earlier I said, we suspect most companies will fit in one of those models. The reason I said most is because there are other examples. And when we looked at this problem, we did see some other models. So for example, there's this one. You do find companies that are selling customized products and they're using a sales force to do it. Problem is their product is kind of cheap and standardized. So you can probably look at this and tell me what the problem is, but yes, this is a model that does not scream gross margin. And if you find yourself in this model, the challenge isn't to support it, the challenge is to fix it, because this is not something that's going to be sustainable long term. Similarly, we also see this a lot. Strangely, this example was sort of a throwaway, kind of funny example, but we're starting to find this happening more and more. And this example is this. In this situation, you're selling something standardized and commoditized, and you're also still selling it through a highly expensive sales force. And your profit margin, again, is probably taking a hit here. We started this out as sort of a joke, but I've done workshops where multiple product sets come back in this model. And one of the things that we realized is this is something no one sets out to be in this model, but they end up in this model. Because what happens is you start out customized and differentiated and or in a high ASP, but as your product starts to commoditize, the complexity drops and then the price usually drops. But if you don't acknowledge that and don't react, you'll find yourself in exactly this same situation. Standard products, not that expensive, really too expensive to sell. And you see this a lot as companies move away from sort of on-premise software. They start to change their business model to more of a subscription recurring revenue model. It changes the dynamics of the offering and the pricing, but they don't react and change their sales model. So don't be in this one, is what I'm saying. And then lastly, there's this. The interesting thing about this is if you figured out a way to sell something super customized and differentiated and you're selling it for a good price and you're doing it in a self-service way, please let us know, because we believe you're probably printing money right now and we'd love to invest in whatever you're doing. So these are the other combinations. There's one that you want to be in and definitely a couple that you don't. So how do you figure out where you are? We have a chart that you can look at that answers, basically you can look at it and take either your entire product or a product or a few products depending on how you want to approach it. And if you answer these questions, it'll give you a score, and that score will tell you where you sit. The interesting part is when you get to the digital hybrid, you're going to have to, there's another set of conversations that you should have to try and determine exactly which digital hybrid you're in, but it'll give you a sense of exactly where you sit. In this, digital type is something that can serve as a foundation, as a piece of alignment that can get the rest of the company, around and agreeing on what the digital type is. So if you're interested in doing this, I'd recommend doing it. I would also recommend that you go out and involve other people. Get somebody from sales, get someone from product marketing, get someone from marketing to do it, and see if you agree. Because step one in being a successful and effective digital marketing company is making sure you have an understanding of your digital type, or more likely, types. So if you're sitting there and you're staring at that sheet and you're thinking, man, I'm going to have a dozen answers to that. It's not as simple as one answer. That's okay. That's actually fairly normal because most companies sell multiple products and most companies have a scale of products and increasing complexity and price. Perfectly okay. What that does mean, though, is you have to put together a set of efforts to make sure that you're handling that effectively. So let's look at it from this point of view. Let's take this example company. Let's start by saying they have a transactional offer, which is clearly digital first, and that they have a solution offer that's clearly digital support. So the extreme ends of this spectrum. When we think about this problem, one of the first things we have to acknowledge is you're going to need specialists for each end because there are different skill sets involved. If you're getting into a digital first environment, you're going to need people that understand e-commerce. Whether it's happening on your site or your partners, this thing is likely going to be sold online somewhere. So you need people that understand how to manage that store, that understand how to create and deploy promotional offers designed to drive conversions, and people that can look at the data and understand what it means and take action based on that data. On the other side of it, because you've got a digital support environment, then you still need people that understand sales. Because in a digital support environment, again, the main goal is to support sales in their quest to close that deal, which means you're going to need people that understand how to talk to sales and how to create tools that support them. So two different sides of the spectrums, two different sets of people and capabilities that you should have in your team. Now that said, there's definitely things that should be the same. The test that I use to determine whether it should be broken out or supporting each thing individually or together is if you find yourself looking at something and it's something that has to be consistent across the organization, it has to be scalable so that you can expand it as needed, it's got to be and cost effective. Typically, if those three things are important, then it needs to be a shared service. And what you see in a shared service space, it's the tech, it's the processes, how you work with each other, the roles and responsibilities. It's the technology, whether it's the CMS or a MAP, a marketing automation platform, or your CRM, they have to be coordinated because you can't, it's unlikely that you can afford all of them separate ones, and also it's unlikely that you want to do that because it adds a ridiculous level of complexity to the problem. And then finally, there's the data structure and the analytics. Regardless of the fact that it's in different models, there's still one company, and you as a marketer are probably going to have to make decisions around allocation of resources from one to the other, and you need a common set of metrics and a common view of it so that you can make those decisions in a meaningful and thoughtful way. So don't panic. Enterprises will have different digital types. It's just a matter of understanding what you need to do separately and what should be shared. In this next section, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to start talking about what digital type means. Hopefully we've given you some tools to help you identify the type. How does that actually affect how you interact and how you work with your customers? To answer that question, we've built a framework that we call the digital journey map. And it starts by outlining two things. It actually talks about the buyer's journey and the customer lifecycle because both things are intertwined now. And as more and more people go into more subscription and revenue model, it's just one giant loop. And inside of that, we outline the fact that there's digital touches and human touches because this is one of the key statements we make about digital marketing. Digital marketing and human touches have to connect. They are not siloed. They're not independent. It's unlikely that you'll be successfully selling everything or anything with just one of these. So with that framework, let's see what a digital first journey looks like. So what you'll notice about it really quickly is because it's digital first, it's primarily digital, but not all digital all the way. Because what will happen is, you'll find someone who perhaps sees some syndicated content, and then they'll search for more information on a search engine. They'll eventually come to your website, and maybe they'll fill in a form for a trial. But it's also likely that they might have to call someone at some point or take a live chat. And typically what you see in this situation is somebody's doing research, they're getting all the answers they need, everything's great. They get to a point where there's a piece of information they can't find, or they just want to hear another human being say, yes, you're correct in interpreting the information, what you're thinking is right or wrong. So they'll pick up the phone or they'll get on chat and they'll ask that question. This point right here, and typically when it does this, when it moves from one to the other, they typically represent really important inflection points in the buying process. Because here, if this person's question gets answered, they just chug on down the rest of the buyer's journey. But if you can't answer this question, the person on the phone can't answer it, or it doesn't seem like they're very knowledgeable, then you're introducing doubt and uncertainty into the buying process, and those are not good for progression. The interesting part is if you think about a lot of digital first orgs, who do they put on their first line of support, their first line of chat? Typically the least senior people they've got, a lot of times the least informed people. And in this format, that's not great, because the person that's calling is probably pretty well informed, and they would rather not hear the same stuff they could have read on the website. So something to think about if you're in this model. Who do you have on that phone call, and are they there to sell, or are they there to answer questions? Assuming that gets through fine, then the solution stage, they'll go look at your website again, figure out if you're the right fit, and then they'll check out your references online likely. And depending on the product, they may actually ask for another actual physical reference call. So that's another place where it'll drop back down. And then as they transition into a customer, most companies will have some sort of support process, and perhaps they'll engage in a chat. And then, most companies as well are also constantly communicating with email, or you should be. So they might read a new email about your feature, and they'll go out and hopefully upgrade and renew and start the cycle over. So this is an example of digital first. The actual boxes and the movement might be different for you, but in general it's going to look like this. On the other side of it, we have digital support, and not surprisingly, it's the exact other way. It's mostly human, because that's the nature of this sell. And a similar dynamic exists here. You might get a situation where somebody comes to a trade show, they talk to your booth people, they get really interested, they bring somebody in, or they ask someone about one of their colleagues for an opinion. Maybe they bring your sales guys in to get a sales call going. It's a good progression. But at some point, the people that are going to have to actually do the work are going to need some details, and typically what happens there is they jump to the website. They go to the website to make sure the salesperson isn't pulling their leg, to make sure that all the things they really need are in there, and to get the deeper, more technical and more complex information that they need. So guess what? In a digital support scenario, if you do this and this happens and your sales guy did their job right, and the customer goes to the website and the website doesn't have the right information, or it talks about it in a different way than a salesperson, or it doesn't emphasize the same thing the salesperson emphasizes, again, doubt and uncertainty in the buying process, and it will likely slow it down. So this kind of shows you that even in a digital support scenario, that digital touch is going to be very, very important. And as in the digital first, it progresses. But in a digital support scenario, digital has a very defined role and a position in it, and it's not necessarily going to be every touch, but every touch that's digital is probably going to be fairly impactful. So something to think about there. And then let's look at the last one, the digital hybrid. The digital hybrid models, not surprisingly, are about 50-50, but the nature of how it happens changes depending on the type of hybrid you are. This one's a really good example of what I would consider a design-driven one. Because in a design-driven one, a lot of times there's a lot of research up front where people are trying to figure out what, is the product even going to be useful? Can this company even help me? And only after you cross that divide where people understand that the product is correct, will they engage your salesperson and begin the process in earnest. And in a digital hybrid scenario, you'll have almost that 50-50 mix of human and digital. But again, both are important. Both have to work together. So how do you use this? Our recommendation is once you've identified your digital type and you understand the journey that you should be providing, take a step back and ignore what you're doing, ignore what you've already done, and figure out what the optimal journey looks like. What would be the best possible journey for your customer? And the best way for them, the most efficient way for them to make the decision about your product. And then you can put in a little bit of your considerations as well to define that ideal state. And then once you have that ideal state, take another step back and look at what you're actually delivering. If that's the ideal state you've defined, is the marketing that you're doing now actually aligned to it? And if it isn't, then that's something that we have to address, and that's something that we have to look to remedy. And that's where we help a lot of our clients, is how to go from where you are to where you should be in an ideal state. So those are the 3 different journey mappings. I do want to show one more, and it's what we call digital nonsense, because this rarely happens. There may be a couple of examples, but I think a lot of times what people have misinterpreted is that concept of 57% of the buyer's journey is done before they call. It's probably true, and the numbers that we saw earlier kind of bear it out, that about 50-something% of the buying journey is digital, but it doesn't happen like this. It happens in the way that we showed you earlier, where it bounces back and forth. It's not a scenario where, oh, I've done my research, I'm going to call a sales guy, and I'm going to stop working online. And I'm going to not call the sales guy until I'm 3/4 of the way through. That is the part that we don't think is correct. So with that, we'd like to show you, this is, as you embark on this journey, as you think about how you affect your digital marketing at the most fundamental level and how you realign and build the most effective organization possible, it starts with figuring out where you sit on this map. Are you a hybrid? Are you a first? Or are you a support? And then what does that mean in terms of the journey that you have to create? And then how do you build an organization around it that will deliver that? So Aimee, tell me a little bit about how you guys can support all of those with your technology.
Sure. Thanks, Gil. Actually, something I was going to mention is, Upland Software is a portfolio of work performance management solutions. We sell many different products, web content management being one of them. And what I would say is, from our standpoint as a B2B software company, SaaS-based, we're definitely, digital support. That's what we focus on for our websites. Clickability, particularly what we're delivering to our customers, is flexibility. Our platform is very flexible, so we can really support each of these types. And when it comes to content, marketing campaigns, features, integration with marketing automation systems, with CRM systems, with e-commerce systems, we can integrate to a lot of different platforms. And so what I would say is, Clickability is really just offering that flexibility to support whatever model our particular customer has. And Gil, do you want to wrap that?
Sure. And I think what you said is usually important, because as we mentioned earlier, most companies will have more than one digital type. And because the CMS is such a foundational piece of it, you want it to be able to support all of it. You don't want multiple of these things.
Right.
No one,
right.
That's
exactly.
too complex. So great reason for why this, it's an important consideration in that. So hopefully today you guys have gotten a good sense of the bigger picture of the changes in digital, how to map your model, and then what it means for your journey. And if we're more than happy to continue this conversation, if you guys would like, just come find us on our website. We have a digital support model as well. So you can come and engage us on our website or through social media. But I think we do have some time for questions if there's any out there. Feel free to, I don't know if everybody's muted or not. So.
If everyone's muted, but if anyone has questions, please feel free to ask them in the questions box, in the chat box. And I'm seeing one coming in. So Sirius decisions, how can I get more information to apply this specifically to my own organization? Do you do digital journey audits? how would we be able to engage with Sirius Decisions?
Sure. At Sirius Decisions, we have a research and advisory model, which means we have research on this topic that we work with our clients on. And the advisory model is how we make some of that research come to life. So as a client, what we do is we work through the end-to-end process. So we actually have frameworks where we will sit down and go through that exercise of what's your type, or actually types, and what does it mean for your journey. And then we have different frameworks and tools where we can sit down and actually map that journey end to end, that ideal state. And then we can step back and take a look at your current journey, identify the gaps, and then work through a process to get that done. And we do that both through through the research that we provide, through advisory that helps you do that on an ongoing sort of supported basis, and then even some consulting where we will roll up our sleeves, lock ourselves in a room with your team and get it done. So absolutely things that, our goal is to not just create the research, but to make it actionable for everyone.
That's great. Yeah, and for myself as a customer of Sirius Decisions the past year, we've really utilized your research extensively to apply it in an actionable way for sales enablement particularly. So love working with you guys in that partnership. I see one more question. It's about, I'm on a legacy CMS platform, homegrown. How do I get started choosing the right platform for me, whether it's SaaS or an on-premise solution? I think what I would say there is, you should absolutely evaluate, a number of applications and determine what's best for your group. But if you don't want your marketing team to be dependent on IT to deliver your website, SaaS solutions are the way to go. So.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, because I think with SaaS solutions, what you get is that flexibility and that ability to deploy quickly, frankly. And I think that, from a larger standpoint too, when you're making a decision around technology like this, it's important to kind of take a step back and think about the business reasons. You want to get a new CMS because there's some capabilities that you want and you may not have right now. So outline those capabilities and understand what they are and how important each one is, and then go in and make that selection based on the product that best fits those capabilities. One of the things people fall into is I call it the bright shiny object trap. Ooh, that's really interesting. That's a really cool feature. I'm going to buy this product because of that feature. But that may not be a feature you really need that much or you can even use. So make sure that the decisions are based on the capabilities that you most need and are most likely to use on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And another piece of that discussion is also mobile. So more and more consumers are using mobile to access a website for information. When they're on the road, people are connected to their devices. And so making sure that you have a platform that can be responsive for mobile is super critical as well. So.
Great point. Yeah, because if you look at the digital journey, that's a situation where you might have customers that, their mode of connecting with you is mostly through their phone because that's how it works. And in that case, you want something that's absolutely mobile. So yeah, it goes back to, if you can understand the digital journey you're trying to support, it'll identify the capabilities you need, which will in turn help you pick the right solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And like as a consumer myself, it's entirely frustrating when I can't get on a company's website on my mobile device or it's a poor user experience. Because, what if I want to rebook a rental car and I'm having trouble booking it at the airport when I'm trying to get a rental car? It's like I'm not in front of my computer. And so to have a poor user experience on the mobile device, it means I'm going to go to a competitor. And so this is something that we're definitely enabling for our clients is mobile responsive design. Super, super important, especially for like the Bazaar Voice example. Mobile is incredibly important for them. So. Okay, I think that's it. Gil, any last comments before we say goodbye, and thank you for attending?
Oh, thank you for your time, everybody, and I hope that you guys got some food for thought today. And if you have, love to hear where you guys end up on that digital type spectrum.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And we'll be sending out a follow-up, so you'll be able to get in touch with Gil if you want to ask more questions or get in touch with me. Talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.